think it's about a good time to start. How's it going, everyone? Honestly, I was going to record this into a YouTube video. And then I got just the nerves. Honestly, it was the nerves. And I'm like, you know what? I'm pulling the old Bill O'Reilly. Fuck it. We're doing it live. And so that's what we're doing. We're doing this video live. Because I feel better live streaming than I do actually recording videos for content. With that being said, hey, look at that. We got a nice map. So, this wonderful map that you're seeing was made by a community member and is currently one of the map. Well, it's pretty much the map that's used for the 2v2 mod that I've made. You can find that on the Steam Workshop. But it was made by Cookie. Cookie, that's who it is. Cookie in the Discord. So if you see him talking, shout out to him. He made this wonderful map that has all the there we go, now that I'm actually clicked in. Has all the markers for where deployment would be. Currently the version that's being used for this that I got the grid stuff on there for. This is a lower res version of it all, because I needed to make things look uniform and nice and do all this. But the actual map is a lot higher res version and looks a lot nicer. But with that all said, terrain. That's why we're here. We're talking about terrain. People lose in this game. People lose in this game for a lot of reasons. They'll blame their deck. Their deck isn't always the issue. Their terrain placement, however, that can be an issue. So, I'm not going to tell you that I'm a savant and that I have all the top tier placements for terrain and where everything is perfect, because every game is different. And you don't know what side you're going to be on and all that other fun stuff. So anyone trying to sell you that they know exactly where to place terrain and they're a master at it and they have that's going to work 100% of the time. No, that's not how that works. It's not how it works, and it's not how it won't work ever like that. With that said, you should 100% be going into a game practicing where you want to place terrain, in what area, and I have an idea for what your game plan is going to be, not only against different seekers, but also against different terrain sets. So there should always be at least an idea of what you're going to play against, how you're going to work around it, stuff like that. So essentially, the best thing I like to do is, you see this grid here on this board right now. Essentially, I like to think of the board in quadrants, and then you break up those quadrants into also 4 quadrants. And no matter what size board we're working with, whether it's the 2 feet, 2.5, 3 feet, same idea. No matter what it is, same idea. Hiccuping at the worst time. So essentially, didn't mean to zoom in that far. But 1, 2, 3, 4. Here, if I draw, will it still draw? It does. That's awesome. If I press delete, no, it doesn't. Okay, what's the clear? Nothing. F2. Fine. Alright. I'll just erase all. Cool. Anyways, so, we'll turn that off again. Cool. So quadrant. we'll just do this in the corner. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. And then each quadrant from there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Make this nice and easy, right? Cool. All right. It's a lot of numbers. It looks a little crazy. That's okay. Essentially, the main thing that you'll always remember, if you want to do it like 1-1, 1.1, whatever you want to call it, these will always, for the most part, be off limits for a good chunk of that part of the terrain, mainly because of deployment zones wherever you are. So there's going to be some that you can mess around with in there, but in general you're not going to be thinking too much about those exact corners per se. Everything else though, you're going to want to work within. That doesn't mean, of course, that you can't play anything in there, mind you, but just, deployment zones, you can't place in deployment zones. That'd be dumb. Forcing someone to spawn on literal flesh gardens would be just broken. But that's not the point. Anyways, with that all said, essentially, you should have an ideal placement setup within all these quadrants. Whether your plan is to be more on the aggressive side, more on the passive side, and what I mean by that is an aggressive setup would probably be more towards center parts of the map in between quadrants. Something all around the board, especially if you're playing with like in a 2v2 setting where you can put 5 pieces. You're going to want to place essentially more around the board. No matter what, someone's going to have to deal with something. No matter what situation you do, even if you do it in these types of corners, doesn't matter. Essentially, everyone's going to have to deal with it no matter where you go. A more passive side, as I would call it. Actually, I can just erase. Why can't I? There we go. Okay, I can just do that. That makes that easier. A more passive side that I would overall say would be if you were doing it essentially, along the middle here. Somewhere within, that whole section. There's a lot of drawings on here, so I'm going to just erase this whole thing now. But essentially, somewhere within the middle is what I would consider more of a passive setup. Why? Because no matter where you spawn, it's going to be accessible to you. You're essentially going to be here in some way, shape, or form. With a more aggressive, essentially trying to force everyone to deal with it no matter what, that type of feeling. Even if you do it on these corners, you're going to be dealing with it no matter where you are, who you are. You can stay away from the center in a game. Putting it on the outside, and you put it all around the outside, you're going to have to deal with it one way or the other. So, with all that said, we'll also go over, I realized I'm still on this, cancel that, there we go. With all that said, one other thing I would also want to talk about, brief overview of at least, what all the terrain does. So of course you have mire. And, if I was actually recording this like I wanted to, I'd have, the card come up and I'd have some information. But no, I don't have that luxury because I have nerves, so I do it live. But with all that said, essentially, it's a fog wall. Actually, wait, I have a fun thing I can do for this, can't I? Where's... there, look at that. It's a giant fog of war. See? Fog of war. It doesn't exist. That's the best way to think about it. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist whatsoever. Can I? Alright, there we go. Okay. I can now delete those fogs. Cool. But yeah, essentially everything inside of it doesn't exist. It's a literal fog wall, and you can only see out once you are inside of it. So, if you're inside, you can see out. If you are outside, you can't see in, you can't see through. If you're partially in, you can still see through because you are partially in. There we go. We'll just drop that all in there. Cool. So, that's the Mire. Mire is scary. However, downside, Veil Piercer. Veil Piercer exists. Veil Piercer just nullifies all of it. There's about a 50% chance that you'll see Veil Piercer in the game. There's only 15 relics. You're going to grab, ideally, 4 right off the bat. So it means another 4 will at least spawn on top here. That's 8 out of the 15. There's a 50% chance overall that, Veil Piercer will be there. And that's just in the initial 8. So, that's the downside to Mire. However, still good terrain. Starcast Halls. All these wonderful things. Also, here, I'll just give what my notes are currently for everything. The Mire. Ideally, when you're playing the Mire, some things you sort of want to do, you want to force fighting in that terrain. If you can hide in there, and Veil Piercer, of course, is not on the stack or, gone, you can force fighting in there. You can just hide and be an asshole. Be a bitch. Nothing wrong with that, truly. If it's going to win you the game, perfect, on top of that, blocks line of sight, wonderful. No one can see through it without that relic. And also, if you have ambush units, you have forward spawns. And if you have a primal totem, you can just drop it in there. And they have to go in there to essentially kill that just to stop a forward spawn point. Of course, overall pros, yeah, like I mentioned, ambush units can, of course, just drop in on there. Of course, if you have the terrain and you think that you're going to get an ambush unit, or, you have a way to, ideally get an ambush unit easily, you can just drop a husk in there. Good to go. Don't have to worry about anything. Especially if you're playing against ranged units, it's wonderful because they gotta approach. They can't do anything. Also, it's nice. Both Mire and, as I'll get to at Starcast Halls, 2 rocks, just 2 giant. You can't do anything about them. Rocks, wonderful, truly. Actually, really good for being a little bit more aggressive and sort of stopping terrain placement from your opponent. Stopping where they could place things. If someone has a piece here, there's like a piece there, and you don't want them to place anywhere in this area, drop a rock. Block it all. There's a lot of stuff that rocks can do. They are wonderful terrain pieces. What else? Oh, and then also, yeah, if you have a ranged unit on the inside of Mire, they're a menace because they can't be shot back. They just sort of sit there and poke everyone down. The funny thing is that the cons of the Mire is literally the same thing as pros, because the moment that it gets flipped, it's a pain in the ass. But it's, yeah, I mean, the pros are also the cons. Also, on top of that, as a more neutral overall point, spawning a husk inside the terrain can be dangerous depending on what your opponent is playing. If they're playing, Polynor or something, you have less to worry about. But if they are playing Vorendel, if they're playing Morda, if they're playing, of course, Thundersteps, so Auric, Ingor, stuff like that, where they have access to ambush units normally, then that's a little bit more scary. But in the overall sense, if you are playing what I would consider an aggressive setup for Mire, it would probably be more placing within, now this is not exact, mind you, but more in this sense, probably these pieces, depending on, what you're going against or what's going on, but I would consider these pieces to be a bit more aggressive. And actually, as a more general note, probably be something like this. More in the sense of having spawn points on either side, so no matter what, wherever you actually get your stuff, you are looking to be, a forward spawn point somewhere that is going to affect the field, and then you have your rocks to sort of block placement, and just be a nuisance. As I have digestion that is just deciding to be an asshole to me. But with that said, if you are playing in a 2v2 with 5, you could probably spread this out just a bit more, in a sense, and do more like that. Probably make some this work in the sense, in a more aggressive sense. In a more passive sense, I would say something that is more along the lines of trying to be more midfield, especially if I have, if I'm playing more 1v1, something like this. And again, this is a general, within this area, this is not perfect. But essentially, if I spawn on these sides, I have access to my large piece over here. If I spawn on these sides, I have my access to this piece. No matter what, I'm going to have access to a piece that I can utilize. And if I spawn on these sides, I have this one as forward spawn. These sides, this one is forward spawn. So, no matter what, there's something that I'm going to get out of this. But that's at least what I would consider a more passive or aggressive setup when it does come to Mire. Personally, at least. But it is important. Play with your deck. Figure out what your deck likes, what you like while playing your deck. Make a plan. Doesn't have to be a perfect plan, but make a plan. That's what you want in the end. Starcast Halls. Now that I'll actually move on to this. Same thing. 2 rocks. Wonderful. Wonderful for being a little bit more aggressive. The biggest, of course, buff pro and con of Starcast Halls is -1 to channels. Why is it a con? Because your opponent, of course, also has -1 to channels. Now, depending on who you're playing, that could be really good for them or for them. If you're going against Thundersteps, it's okay. It's not bad. It's good for him, but it's okay. You're going against Polynor. Fuck. You have brought Polynor exactly what he wants. You have brought a gun to a knife fight, and then you gave him the gun. So, with all that said, personally, I don't care for this tiny piece. This tiny piece can be good. I personally don't care for it. I like the rocks more, at least the Starcast Halls. With that said, again, I'm not a savant. I'm not telling you what is great, what's bad. All the terrain sets in themselves are good. It's just more in the sense of what works for you. And again, if there was a more aggressive setup and a more, passive setup, be looking, like that. However, when it does come to Starcast Halls, I would personally say having a more passive setup would benefit you, like pretty much whoever's bringing it in general, more than it's going to benefit to try to be on the aggressive side. Especially with having 2 rocks, and the only ability to, get there is to walk there. There's no, ambush to just spawn in there or anything. It's definitely better to play this a little bit more on the passive side. Now, granted, if you found a way to make it play, more on the aggressive side, awesome, perfect, go for it. But in the overall sense, playing this more, towards the center, maybe even off-centering it, so it's more like this, and then having this one, being another way, or you could do this over here with this over here. So essentially you have all your base covered. And just play 1 rock. Or do what I do. And more in this kind of formation. Where I want to cover it either way. But at the same time, I want my rocks. And I mean, if you change this up a little bit, but in the overall sense, probably be a little bit more on the passive side. And at least passive for this one would probably be more actually on the outer side, just because of the benefits that you get for this one. And forcing people to be away from the action in the center, with then the rocks coming more towards the center, usually is what I like, if possible. But that is, Starcast Halls. Again, reducing spell cost. You're wanting to play a little bit more on the passive side. You're wanting your units to be more bonuses for activations, stuff like that. That's perfect for Starcast Halls. If you can force a fight on there, perfect, because you're now you're ideally going to be getting that buff, and hopefully more than your opponent. And the other really nice thing about all the stuff is walls. You can just, if you have ranged units, hide in here. Great stuff. This one, of course, perfectly. Crap. Anyways, you can, of course, hide in there perfectly. Just have a bunch of sniping points everywhere. Of course, this one also can act like a jail. If they have a bunch of, ranged units on the outside, they have a bunch of shots in. And then, of course, this one, not bad, but you can also, of course, get the benefit and, still have walls for protection. And then rocks. Overall, yeah, giving -1 to your opponents for channels, not great, but, benefits in other side of terrain. It is what it is. You bring it knowing what you're doing. because it's neutral, and your opponent's going to bring something that's going to benefit you for the most part, unless it's Flesh Gardens. But your opponent's going to bring something that benefits you too. So it's just sort of dealing with those benefits and of course, had a yawn right there. But of course, dealing with those benefits, those pros and cons, that's all it is. Just trying your best to mitigate that risk if you can. Also, the terrain can sometimes be weird to maneuver around, especially depending on your base size. It can be a little issue to get through, even on the big one. Next, though, we have Asterian Pathways. So, Asterian Pathways, as long as you are, using a move action while on Asterian Pathways, you get +2 to movement. On top of that, if you do charge on it, you get +4. It's wonderful. That yawn just really wanted to hit me all of a sudden. But Asterian Pathways. It's a great piece of terrain. There are no just straight rocks. It is only open places with lots of walls. That is a good part about it. Lots of walls. Of course, the increased movement speed while on it. But yeah, no rocks. That's okay. All your walls here, and maneuvering with it sort of makes up for it. Yawning is just really hitting me out of nowhere. With that said, if you were to be more aggressive on this, I'd say Asterian Pathways aggressive is throwing it near every corner for the most part, right? But the difference is using the walls to essentially create those rocks to where the person has to go around them. Really, God, just really happening today. Anyways, but yeah, using those walls to just sort of create that place to essentially be annoying. Of course, you're not going to get this perfectly like this. You're going to have to maneuver stuff, out here. But ideally, you essentially have a lot of walls blocking line of sight, forcing units to sort of run away from the buff that, you sort of want to keep for yourself, ideally. This specific piece, it's okay. I like the other ones better. They just have more coverage. That's it. My God. I don't know what's with me. But lots of coverage. Lots of just things that you're forced to maneuver around, even with the windows, and just, leaving a ranged unit in there. It's still just, not as good to sort of leave them in there. But it's a great way to, protect them. If you want a unit that wants to be protected, sort of tuck him in. And for the most part, he's got a good wall blocking him. But that would at least be the main thing. If I were to make more passive setup for Asterian Pathways, it'd definitely be more, center focused, as mentioned beforehand. Probably something more like this. In a sense, you know, just trying to be a little bit more gaining of the buffs. Something in this sense. And then I'd probably try to do that. Something in this fashion, probably. More of, you know, just try to survive and be able to have lots of movement from the center in and then also getting out. But with that, we then have our last one of the Flesh Gardens. My God. There we go. So at least with Flesh Gardens, of course, if you touch the blood, go on the blood, activate on the blood, doesn't matter, 3 damage. Large open pieces. Lots of room to sort of push someone into, but also at the same time, a lot of places to sort of put yourself to be or something. Overall, some things that I would personally, some things I personally enjoy about this set, when you are being a little bit more aggressive with it, one of the nice things you can do is sort of like force corridors, essentially. Really just catching up to me today. Anyways, sort of like force corridors and force ways for your opponent to be in this possible area. Whether it's just, you know, using your opponent's terrain and then, you know, slipping one of these in, or more of just setting the stage yourself. But it is a good way to sort of put the pressure on without even having to do anything. A lot of what I like to do personally, something like this, and something like either one of these. This is always nicer because, you know, you can always just see right through. But of course, from the center, this makes it easier to knock them in. Or, sorry, more like this. But this is a great way to sort of be able to look through, and if you have a momentum weaver, you know, pulling him through. If you have anyone else with, you know, knockback or something, you can sort of just, you know, shoot right through. But yeah, either way, it does work. This would be better in a more 2v2 situation. This would be better, of course, in a 1v1. And then, of course, with like these larger pieces, I like to, you know, or the smaller pieces, like to just sort of stick them out. So then, of course, you know, the small thing has to be dealt with. You know, it has to be feared, has to be respected, because you can just put someone into it easily. With this set, I'd probably say there isn't really a passive setup. It is what it is, you know. But in that overall sense, you have all this, you know, wonderful terrain. You know, you set up your game plan, all that kind of stuff, and then the last part is also then your husks. There we go. And with your husks, you also have to have a game plan. One thing that I like to do, and I'm going to change the camera here just so that we can get the ring a little bit easier. One thing I like to do with husks is try to cut off possible spawn points, placing it more not in the terrain, but more so it covers as many spawn points as in general, or more like terrain spots. At least in that way, you can cut off them, trying to place on a certain terrain, and sort of trying to get that bonus, especially against Mire, sometimes with pathways too, but you can sort of cut that off easier. Or if you have a unit that can play around specifically, and you have a shot to put it in there, putting it in the terrain is a wonderful idea. Flesh Gardens, great place to actually put a husk, especially if you have a flying unit. You just fly in there and take it. You don't gotta worry. Mire, of course, if you have ambush, great place. Let's see. The other two, decent. Nothing bad, but long story short, ideally you should try to have a plan with your husk placement and what you want to do, what kind of goals, what you want to cover from your opponent, and what you both do and don't want to let them grab. I will always recommend placing more towards the center for a little bit more of a balanced setup. However, do whatever you want, you don't know where you're going to be, and you don't want to be relic starved right out the gate because you think that, or you might have thought that you could try to, snag 2 over here in this corner. If you had that, we'll say like right there, this one here, and now you have a straight shot to both of these pretty easily. So it can be risky. You can do a lot of things with it, but personally, I would say playing a little bit more towards the center, covering options, covering possible spawns, covering possible issues, essentially, in the terrain. That is where you want to be. But yeah, that would at least be pretty much the basic stuff I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I mean, that is for the most part the main stuff I wanted to talk about, at least with terrain. Terrain is a tricky, fickle thing. It's ever-changing. You never know what's going to happen. But that's okay. Just go in with a game plan. That's it. Go in with a game plan. I think if you at least can figure out a game plan, go in with it, you'll at least be ahead of the curve. But yeah, sit down. Don't just practice what you have going currently in your deck. Practice terrain placement. Do it yourself. Essentially play a chess match between yourself with terrain placement. What would you do in this situation? How would you play not only player 1 but player 2, and sort of shadow box yourself, essentially. Highly would recommend to do that. But with all that said, at least at the moment, I am going to call the stream for now. So thank you all for watching. And maybe I'll stream some more in a bit, maybe not. I don't know. But thank you all for watching at least now. I will see you guys later.